Hello, Jim. What is the origin of a lot of wrestlers having bleached hair? Was Gorgeous George the first? My uneducated guess is that it allowed the people in the back row to be able to see easier when a wrestler is bleeding.
Well, I think that was probably a pleasant byproduct, but that wasn't what they were going for. No, I mean, and George was not the first to bleach his hair any more than actually it's been talked about that he took part of the gimmick from Lord Lansdowne, Lord Finnegan, and took part of the gimmick from his friend, childhood friend from Houston, Dizzy Davis. But it made a heel instantly a heat magnet visually because, a pretty boy guy with bleached blonde hair probably looked ambiguously gay or whatever, which ambiguously was enough in those days for people to go with it. But who the first was, hard to say, but really George and Buddy Rogers pretty much did it at the same time. And if you want to look at who was Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair of their era, it was Gorgeous George and Buddy Rogers. Buddy Rogers was the fucking, he was the guy that all the guys wanted to be like and all the women loved, but at the same time he was a fucking heel and he had the strut and the great physique and he was the workhorse. He was the fucking in-ring performer. But Gorgeous George was the Hogan. He was the showbiz wrestler from, he was Hollywood wrestling while Buddy Rogers was in Chicago. It was almost a classic parallel. And he wasn't the best worker, but he was solid. But his gimmick was what made him money. And he got over probably bigger than Buddy Rogers did on a mainstream level for a short period of time because he was TV friendly. The TV stars and the people with the sitcoms or Milton Berle or Bob Hope could kind of have their picture taken with Gorgeous George and it's ha-ha and do skits with him on TV because he's in California and he's on TV and it's a kind of a hoot. Whereas Buddy Rogers might not have maybe taken liberties. So who was the first is not necessarily the most important, but it was what they were trying to portray. And then as we've seen, anytime something is successful in wrestling, it's copied. So Buddy Rogers gave birth to Nature Boys for 3 generations. And, everybody wants to look like Hulk Hogan with the body and the goddamn tan and the fucking whole 9 yards. And when the Road Warriors were the hottest thing, everybody was wearing spikes and face paint. The tag teams did it because the Fargos and Ray Stevens and guys like that idolized Buddy Rogers. I don't think a lot of people, there was tons of, Gorgeous George had a junior and a third, people emulated him. So once it started, you couldn't stop it, but it would go to Rogers and George as to who really made it commonplace and something that people wanted to copy.
It wasn't just a Gorgeous George Jr. and a Gorgeous George III. There were other rival Gorgeous Georges that popped up.
Oh yeah, Gorgeous George fucking Grant, yeah. Right? And they would fool people. When you think about the fact checking, and maybe it's just because it was wrestling and they didn't take it seriously, but when all these fake Gorgeous Georges would die in those days, the fact checking, I'm wondering who else got away with shit that we just didn't know about in the paper.
Stan Lane, the fake Stan Lane when he died.
Well, yeah.
It is amazing if you actually try to put it in context. What separates Gorgeous George from Buddy Rogers is Buddy was this amazing all-around worker, but Gorgeous George was a national sensation. And just to think about the people who had television early on watching the Dumont Network, and here comes a man who looks and acts like no other man ever, let alone on television, very few in the history of movies. There were very few characters like Gorgeous George for the public to just take in.
Yeah. And we get immune to that and we forget about it. I'm doing an article for Fighting Spirit magazine because it's been 20 years, I'll have you know, since Steve Austin first gave the stunner to Vince McMahon. And then here comes Mr. McMahon, and then all of a sudden we've got a heel authority figure. And now do you think there are probably wrestling fans out there right now that don't realize that there was never a heel authority figure in wrestling until 20 years ago?
The earliest one I could remember off the top of my head, it's different, but Tom Ernesto in '85 in Memphis.
Well, yeah, yes. But that's why I've even said, for a short term or a few weeks, somebody won it in Memphis or won the right or whatever. And people also have said, well, Eric Bischoff joined the NWO, but he was really portrayed as an announcer at that point. Even when he was really running the place, he was so new that nobody thought he was running the place. But once the heel authority figure was done, find me a promotion. Thankfully, besides Ring of Honor, we managed to avoid that. I hope they haven't done it since I've been gone. Another promotion that hasn't done the heel authority figure, heel fucking commissioner, heel guy tells people what to do, because it got over. It's the same thing with whether it's the blonde hair or the face painting spikes or the whatever. When something gets over in wrestling, you can rest assured that it will be done until nobody ever wants to see it again.
Yeah, it drives me crazy that the things that people copycat from the WWE are the heel authority figures, scripting wrestling. I mean, no one was doing that. And then WWE did it. Then everyone said, oh, okay, we should be doing that too. Why?
And also the whole idea of the heel authority figure was because it was perfect with Austin and McMahon. They were tremendous television performers. It was a perfect timing. They played off of real life incidents that weren't scripted and happened out of everybody's control, the screw job, etc. They played off of all those that people knew were facts, which made them believe a little bit more in that. The whole thing, it was one of those finishes that the first time you ever see that once in a lifetime finish, it gets over great. And the fourth time in 6 months, you see something that could only happen once in a million years. It's a fart in fucking church. It's the same example. You can't. It's like the first David Von Erich Memorial with Flair and Kerry for the title was a match that needed a stadium, right? There was no place indoors that could handle the 40,000 people that were going to come to see it. It's a match that needs a stadium. And then every year after that they did it, it was a stadium that needed a match. And that was two different things.